to stand back here because I wrote my presentation a little long because I knew that I was following Mario and Patti, who are both the rock stars of sustainability. So I had to find out what they were saying before I knew what to cut for mine and what to add. So does anybody know where that house is that's on the board right there?
Uh-huh.
Yep. Do you know why it's relevant? Okay. That is, what's that?
It's McCormick.
It's McCormick's house, exactly. I'll talk about that in a second, but note that is in Smicksburg, correct? Am I right? Yeah. So it's in Smicksburg. I found it the other day when I was looking for pictures of Indiana County when I was making this presentation for people. When I came in late, but I saw what you guys talked about for most of the day today. I had a brief conversation with Etta, who I had a conversation with Etta a few weeks ago, and one of the things she said was, there's so much information. You know, you guys have talked about jobs, you talked about energy, you talked about solar, you talked about ecotourism, you talked about local food, you talked about municipal operations, and it can be overwhelming. So what I'm going to talk about is, at some point, I'm going to briefly go over some of the things that I think are still important that Patti and Mario talked about. I'm just going to briefly touch on them, but I'm then going to talk about other parts of not just municipal operations, but how a municipal can work with planning. I'm going to talk about systems thinking and how that's important, and I know that Patti talked about that a little bit as well. And then I'm going to talk about the programs and the tools that the Sustainable Pittsburgh can provide you to start this process. Whether you're a business or a municipality or a community development corporation or just an interested citizen, I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about Indiana County and what's going on here from a really brief overview that I did just for a few minutes at the end of the presentation. To the next slide, please. I'm going to mention one thing that wasn't mentioned before when both of the previous presenters, it's good that we're all on the same page. It's good to see that. We all use the exact same image. But what's happening in between those circles? When you just focus on the economic, which is what we did after the Industrial Revolution for hundreds of years, all we did was focus on economic. And then we had catastrophes of the work problems in the US and the Western world, and unions formed, and they started to protect the social entities a little bit more. And is anybody familiar what happened in Donora in the 1940s? They had inversions in Donora that poisoned and killed people in weeks because of pollution. And that's really when the environmental movement started. And Rachel Carson wrote her book right around that time as well, that we started to protect the environment. And now we've shifted and we're doing a very good job protecting the environment and not as good a job still looking at social, well, I shouldn't say that. We still have a problem that economic sphere is still 4 times, 5 times, 6 times as large as the other 2 spheres. And we really have to look at them together. And I think one of the things that we've talked about in a lot of urban development, what I was going to say was that, a lot of the urban development and a lot of sustainability movements in urban development is focusing still on the environment and not as much on the social. So I want to make sure that we pay attention to both those things when we move forward. And if you could hit the next slide, please. This is, Mario talked about catalysts for innovation, and I think that I want to bring it up as well and touch up on it just briefly. Anytime you're limited in something, anytime you're forced to deal with less or forced to deal with, let's say you don't have enough money, that's when you're forced to be innovative. For example, Mario just brought up something earlier today about that truck. He found out that he did a greenhouse gas inventory. He figured out that he did a fleet overview, and he realized that he wasn't going to be able to afford to switch over to natural gas or to electric vehicles for his larger trucks. So he said, what can I do? And he made an innovative change and combined 2 trucks together. That's what I'm talking about. Well, John B. McCormick is the one who invented this wheel. This wheel doubled, tripled, and quadrupled the level of production that a water wheel produces. You can actually see a working one if you ever go to, McConnell Mills. If you ever go to McConnell Mills, they have a working version of this. What it did was, and it goes back to the talk that Patti was mentioning, was it takes the whole system into account. So before, water wheels would just go and let water flow over the top of them. So water would just be utilizing one section of the wheel at a time. This wheel lets water drop through it. That's where the fins are on the bottom and the fins all through it. So it's using every part of that system at the same time. And that's really what sustainability is about. It's about looking at every part of the system. How do we take advantage of every part of the system? And it was invented by a gentleman who lived here in Indiana County. So I thought that was a pretty cool connection. I got interested, and we mentioned Rachel Carson, and I also wanted to mention Paul Hawking, who wrote the book Ecology of Commerce in the 90s. And I think it was also one of the first times that I understood that environmentalism could actually be and strengthen the economy that we have. He talks about the idea that, if we did take and understand that just removing things from the earth is part of the equation, but also what we do to them after we take them out of the earth and how we put them back, it should be a part of the equation. And actually, we can make money off that. For example, I know you had I know Sharon spoke earlier today. There are 60,000 jobs in the coal industry in the United States right now. There are 250,000 jobs in the solar industry. And they're growing much faster, and they represent a much smaller slice of the pie for energy production. So it's important that we recognize that doing things the right way can actually be a huge economic boon. And he also mentioned two other things. Quotes I like. The first rule of sustainability is to align yourself with natural forces. And then all things are connected. And if you could hit the next slide. I want to talk real briefly about systems thinking. And I can't, for some reason, mine didn't print out some of the names, so I don't have all the notes on here. But I wanted to bring this up because, and I'm going to talk about mostly municipal government and community development, but I wanted to bring it up because we live in all different types of systems, and understanding and utilizing and being empowered by those systems is something that is incredibly important when you're talking about sustainability. A system looks at the linkages and interactions between numerous complex systems, but then there's systems of systems, and there's hierarchies, and all these different ways. And when you're, for example, a municipality, you have to understand that you have the systems that are above you. You have the state, you have federal, you have county, and then you have broad systems like Pennsylvania Municipal League that operates as a system that can help you out. The Center for Neighborhood Development, the Metropolitan Planning Organization. They're all systems that you have to interact with. And learning and understanding how to interact with those is an incredibly important way to leverage what you can do at your local municipality or local community. Whether you are a municipality or whether you are one of, like Patti was talking about, the people of power that have influence and are doing good things. So, and then also, if those systems obviously don't work well together, you see all those lists of failures. It's very easy, and obviously we're experiencing a lot of them right now because we don't have the same goals. We have confused goals. We have lack of understanding is a huge problem. Flawed design, perverse incentives, all of those things. But if you could flip to the next slide. Aligning those things is the first start. Figuring out how to do that. And Patti did an awesome job of explaining why we should be doing those things and kind of a broad overview. And I hope that Sustainable Pittsburgh and the Sustainable Pennsylvania Plan can give you ideas of very concretely what you can do to take action on. And we still see ourselves as a start to the conversation, but at least you get your foot in the door. You get to see and get to measure what your municipality is doing. And it really, you'll notice, I'm not going to go through all those different concepts, but you'll notice that I'm going to talk about a lot of those different concepts in the sustainability assessment. I'm going to try to touch on some of those details so that I know Peter Broad from Indiana Borough went through it with me, and we had when we sat down for 4 hours together and walked through the whole thing. And a lot of things, the nice thing about Indiana Borough is they're already doing a lot of the things, and really you want to then take what you're already doing and then find how you can leverage things and move things forward. I've also, Mario and I have worked closely together over the years. You can't avoid Mario if you work in this field. He's the rock star of sustainability at the municipal level. If you want to hit the next slide. just to briefly overview what Sustainable Pittsburgh does as an organization, and again, my slide for some reason doesn't have anything that's in black is blacked out of mine. I wanted, you've heard this said, if you can measure it, you can manage it, and that's really what these do. We have two main ways that we try to give tools to municipalities and to businesses. We work with businesses, municipalities, we work with organizations in Pittsburgh and in the region. We see the Southwest Pennsylvania, the 10 counties of Southwest Pennsylvania as our region. So one of the ways we do that is performance programs. And we leverage the what's considered competitive arousal. And I read the research finds that the desire to win, even when it's not to your benefit, is heightened when you create rivalry and you put time pressure. So that's really what our performance programs try to do. We try to pit people against each other. Oh, you're doing a great job. And Mario is a perfect example, right? Because he is constantly pushing other people, and people want to achieve more because of that. And because of it, in the last 3 months, we've had 3 municipalities go platinum in Allegheny County and in the state at large. Oh, actually 3 just in Allegheny County, now that I think about it. And so that's the idea behind the performance programs. There's 3 main performance programs and then 1 kind of competitive time-based program. The small business designation program is for small businesses, 50 people and under. We have 200 plus businesses around the region. Not as many here. We have a lot in Beaver County, some in Butler County, and then of course Allegheny County. Then we have the Sustainable Pittsburgh Restaurant Program, which kicked off about a year ago. That has been incredibly successful. That has really moved itself because the local food movement has just taken on a life of its own. And people want that, people understand it. And also there's a lot of repeated business. You want to understand what you're eating. So that has been a great thing. We haven't been able to really expand that beyond Pittsburgh because we haven't had the capacity to do that. And then there's the Sustainable Pennsylvania program. And all of those are essentially just checklists. They're volunteer programs that we take people through that a business owner or a municipality can go through to see, okay, what are the best practices in sustainability and what can we do to do better? And then we give them a grade. And we encourage them to use that, to put it on their window. We market for them. We advertise for the restaurants. We advertise for the the businesses, and then for the municipalities, we highlight that. We want them to highlight it on their website, and they're recognized statewide because, and I'll get to that in a second. But the Sustainable Pennsylvania program is a little bit different in that we have a partner organization in that. We work with the Pennsylvania Municipal League, so that's a statewide program. And then we have networks that we also work with. We have CEOs for sustainability. There's 18 CEOs that are in the city of Pittsburgh and just outside the city of Pittsburgh. We have champions for sustainability, which are essentially a lot of large corporations have sustainability coordinators, and they're trying to push where they can to do better, and we're trying to leverage that and to get them to work together and encourage other people in their cohort to do better. And then we're reinstituting the Sustainable Community Development Network, which is, okay, let's say Peter and Dana and the team at Indiana Borough go through the certification. Now what? What do you do now? And that's where we want to encourage people to be part of that network so that as they see problems and move forward, they have opportunities and they can learn from each other. So that's what if you could hit the next thing, that's what that will do for you. I wanted to just give people an understanding of how complex the state of Pennsylvania is and why it's difficult, and how many different, I talked about the different systems. And so it's important to understand what we're dealing with when we're dealing with trying to encourage municipal governments to incorporate sustainability. And that is that we are third in the country for the number of municipalities, and we have the highest density of municipalities in the entire country. The other 2 states that are larger, the one that is one is bigger and one has more authorities than we do. So Texas is the only state Texas and Illinois are the only states that have more municipalities. And so it's a difficult problem. Every inch of Pennsylvania is incorporated, meaning that all land use and planning is dealt with at the municipal level. So anything that is done has to be done by anything that's done when it comes to land use. For the most part, there are some counties that take over planning, but for the most use, it's done at the municipal level. And it is the goal, I mean, it's basically the charge of the municipality to promote, protect, facilitate the public health, safety, and general welfare of its residents. That's its general charge. Now that's written in a zoning code. It's and one of the main things that a municipality does is manages land use for one thing. They manage a lot of transportation construction, although they have to interact with the other systems that they're a part of, right? They have to interact with the county system, they have to interact with the federal and state systems. And then they are often public safety, but not always. And then, of course, my slide is erased. If you could forward to the next slide, please. And I guess I explained a lot of this. Let me. It's a voluntary recognition program. We work with the Pennsylvania Municipal League, and I'm with Sustainable Pittsburgh. I manage it for the most part statewide, though. I'm meeting with PML next week to hopefully take a little bit of that burden away from me so that we can help spread this program across the state a little more. There's 131 criteria, just to give you an idea of how many different things affect municipal sustainability. There's 9 subject areas, and we use web verification to check whether someone has done it. It's not a perfect system, but it's a pretty good system because we recognize that if a municipality says they're doing something and they put it up on the website, they're probably going to have some angry citizens if they're not doing something and they put it up on the website. So that's how we do verification. And we're also recognized by DCET. So you talked about grants. And if you apply for a grant through the Department of Community and Economic Development, right on the first page of that grant, it asks you whether you're part of Sustainable Pennsylvania. So they value it. They see it as something that they want to see municipalities doing, and it's been increasingly gaining interest around the state. It just happened last fall, and we kind of they quietly did it, and we're now, because they didn't want to get a flood of municipalities at first, and now we're working with advertising that across the state and getting more people involved. There are 69 municipalities currently certified, representing 2.8 million people. Obviously, with the number of municipalities in the state, you know that a lot of those municipalities are large. We have Philadelphia is in the program, Pittsburgh is in the program, and some of the larger cities as well. But there's we have a city as small as 87 that's certified. 87 people. That gives you an idea. The average size municipality in the state, does anybody have any idea how, not people who are in municipal government, does anybody have an idea of how big the average size municipality is in the state of Pennsylvania? Anybody want to throw it? What's that? 10,000? 4,400. Okay, so there's a lot of small municipalities, and that's where. And when they get charges like Patti just made, it's daunting. You know, she made a lot of things. You know, she put out a lot of ideas, and they're great ideas. But the first step is, well, where do I go from here? And so we want to have a tool in place for people to start that conversation with people. And really that's what this is about. So if you want to head to the next slide. These are on my page for some reason. I don't know, some are and some aren't. I guess I did them on different computers. I'm just going to go briefly over some of the criteria. I don't know how much time I have, so I don't want to go in 10 minutes.
Yeah, 10 minutes.
Okay. So I don't want to bore a bunch of people who are not part of municipal government and don't necessarily want to know the nuance, but I'm going to touch upon a few things so that they can see what it means to be sustainable for a municipality. We talk about municipal operations. We ask whether a municipality has a professional accountant on staff or someone that they hire as a professional accountant. You'd be amazed how many people don't even have that. Okay, so we want to make sure that they're handling their money properly. We want to make sure that they're also preparing for the future, carrying over 5 to 10% of their funds every year. Now, these are aspects of sustainability. Are they managing their economics well? We ask them if they plan for their capital investments like water and sewer, like Mario was talking about how much they found a waterfall, you know, that was running water for 20 plus years possibly. So how are you looking forward to and planning that future? Are you paying attention to that? And of course, you're going to hear that a lot of these ideas go back to that idea of systems thinking, planning and measuring and all those things. These are really important things to understanding and managing sustainability. We talk about cooperations and partnerships, and that goes into the systems ideas too. If you want to be a good government, you want to get things done, partnerships are key, they're paramount. being able to interact with DCED, being able to interact with the state, all of those things are incredibly important to what you're doing. And then we also ask a question, and typically a municipality that first does this doesn't do very well, and then we ask generally about that, about sustainability. Do you view things through a sustainability lens? Do you manage through sustainability? And almost every municipality, when they first do it, they don't. They don't look at their planning process that way, they don't look at their management process that way. But over the years, I think we have something like 25 municipalities that are now using that in their comprehensive plan. When they look at their comprehensive plan, they're taking the three Ps and they're looking at how they're planning moving forward. And that's really what we're trying to encourage. And that goes through a number of different things. The sustainability we're talking about assessments and planning and measurement. And then public safety, do you have a comprehensive plan? Again, you're going to hear plan a lot, because if you plan well at a municipal level, you'll be much more successful. And then we also talk about healthy communities. And I know that I forget your name, who is here talking about agriculture, but we talk about agriculture in a couple of different places throughout this. But they mentioned that local food is integral to sustainability, and we truly do believe that. We encourage people to have farmers markets and community gardens, because oftentimes a municipality, if they haven't written that into their ordinance or into their code, it's not something that you can do. You can't have a community garden for a number of reasons. So simple little things like that can make a big difference, and this is why we take people through this process. And then we talk about walkability. When we talk about healthy people, we talk about walkability in parks and how do they deal with herbicides and pesticides in their municipal operations. So these are all things that we touch upon. If you want to hit the next slide. And then we also talk about diversity, inclusion, equity, and we touch upon it in a number of different ways that the municipality has power and control over this, and that is how do you deal with human resources? What's your hiring practices look like? Do you have a written hiring practice? You'd be amazed at how many municipalities. I was just talking to a municipality last night that fired someone for sexual harassment, and they're lucky they didn't get sued because they had no policy for sexual harassment. And I don't know if any of you, and this was a big borough, this is, I'm not going to mention the name, but they're lucky they didn't get sued for it. And that's one of the things that, one of the very simple things for sustainability that a municipality should do, that a community should do. Most businesses have caught on because they've been sued, but a lot of municipalities haven't had that problem yet, so they haven't done anything about it. Do you interview a wide range of candidates when you're looking for jobs? Do you specifically seek out people who aren't typically in that job? People of color, women, other, do you specifically seek those out? Because if you want to encourage diversity, you have to seek people out. You have to go where they are, just as Patti was mentioning, to create sustainability. When you're doing contracts, a lot of state and federal contracts, when you apply for or when you do an RFP, it'll have a little addendum in there. Are you sending this bid out to at least one woman-owned company or minority-owned company? And we encourage the municipality to do that themselves. It shouldn't have to be just on state contracts. It shouldn't have to be just on federal contracts. It should also be done on, if you're putting a bid out, that you should be encouraged to do that. And that helps lift people up, because it's still, especially in the municipal world, if you look at elected officials across the state and you look at the different authorities, they're mostly men. It's mostly older white men. So what you can do to encourage more diversity in that. We also talk about how you cooperate with school districts. We give a number of different things. Cooperating with the school district is often a difficult thing. School districts don't often see how they interact how they interact with municipalities. So there's a number of criteria for that. If you want to hit the next page, I'm going to touch upon a few things that Patti talked about that maybe she could have used some of the tools that we knew about. And I'm going to mention one of the things. So when it comes to energy audits, there's actually a free tool that you can use to do an energy audit by just entering your bills into the Energy Star system. So I don't know, are you familiar? Did Energy Star? Oh, you did do it, okay. Okay, good. Okay, so we have tools available for that. And then there's ICLEI too, which we encourage people to do when it comes to community energy use. You can look at how much energy your entire municipality uses. Typically, a borough like Indiana Borough is going to use far less greenhouse gas just by the way it's designed than White Township, simply because it's denser and the buildings are closer together and there's not as much travel needed, and the buildings are typically smaller, so you're going to use more. You're going to use a far less. If you looked at the carbon footprint of those two entities, even if they had the exact same population, you'd probably find that Indiana Borough is better from a green energy standpoint than White Township. Not to pit the two against each other, but just to understand that's how greenhouse gases work. So we encourage municipalities to do energy audits to plan for a reduction. Once you do an energy audit, just don't replace the lights and then set it on a shelf. Plan for what you can do next. Look at the capital investments that you can make to do a better job. Mario gave a great example of the Guaranteed Energy Savings Act, which is called GIZA. It was in place, and it's a pretty forward-thinking thing that Pennsylvania has, that you can save money. You could do these huge replacements, not invest any money in the upfront aside from some money for planning, and just use the money that you save off the investments to pay for the investments. It's a tool that is unique to Pennsylvania. It's in a number of other states, but it's not in all states. So that's a nice tool. We ask about green buildings. Do you have a written policy for green buildings? We also encourage municipalities to do that if you, which is often not there. So, and I see that I'm already running out of time here, so I'm gonna move us forward. If you want to go, so you can see some of the things we talk about. Housing, we talk about encouraging affordability. There's a number of things that municipalities can do on their zoning ordinance to encourage affordability. Sustainable neighborhoods, talk about good code enforcement. Land use and transportation. These are all the areas that municipalities have some level of control over, and things that we encourage a municipality to do. When it comes to thriving green businesses, let's see where we encourage people to be a part of the Main Street program, and encourage your businesses to get involved. And we have the Sustainable Small Business Program, which we're happy to encourage municipalities to use and utilize that tool. And then if you want to go to the next one, I'm just going to touch real quickly on Indiana County itself and the region. I just did some back-of-the-hand equations, and this looks like a pretty confusing map. And the reason it looks confusing is that you've had both population increase and population decrease across the region. You haven't had dramatic, some of the townships have had some more dramatic declines. The bright red are dramatic declines. The green is increases, and you can see that the bright green is 25% increases. So overall, the region hasn't really, it's lost a few percentage points, but it hasn't lost a ton. So that's a good thing for the sign of the diversified economy. If you want to hit the next one, you'll see it's actually a new site that's up called USA Facts. It's if you're not a data person and you want to look at and you want to look at data in a simple way, they do a really nice job. It's a gentleman who used to run I forget his Ballmer, who was one of the CEOs or one of the people in charge at Microsoft designed this. Yeah, it's a pretty cool tool. You can do this for any county. You can do it for lots of different reasons. And if you were to look at the page where I pulled this from, you can scroll down the page and see all kinds of really good facts. It's a good thing to know where Patty talked about knowing where you're at. And this is a great way to understand, what's going on. And the nice thing about this told me about Indiana County was it's a pretty diversified county. Unlike we go to Greene County, where they have so heavily dependent on the coal industry that it would be, you see a lot more down on one side. To have a diversified economy like that is a very good thing. You want to hit the next slide. But the concern is, and I made this quickly yesterday because I went through a whole bunch of different topics and I wanted to understand more about it. The green is actually kind of a negative thing, not a positive thing. And I would have reversed those colors if I would have thought about it a little bit more. But the green this is your aging population, okay? So the median age in those dark green areas is 20% higher than it was, 20%, which is a pretty significant median age change, is 20% higher than it was in 2000. And the problem with that, it wouldn't be a problem in and of itself, but if you flip to the next slide, from a sustainability point of view, is young people are the people that move. Older people don't move. So if you want to bring people to the community, you really have to focus on making the community a great place to live. You talked about ecotourism, which is great. You talked about sustainable agriculture. All are great things, and I think that those are the types of things that should be encouraged. And I'm just kind of reiterating what they said, but I think that should be one of the bigger concerns when it comes to Indiana as a county and what you can do for economic development across the region. And if you pay attention to sustainability and innovation, these are the things that young people want. If you flip to the next slide, I also talked about driving and things like that. People want that. Young people want to live in a small community. They want not a small, diverse, innovative community. They want to live where they can walk. And actually, the only place, if you notice, the only place that showed a drop in age was Indiana Borough, right? Because it has a lot of these things. It has a diverse mix of housing. It has healthy amenities. It is walkable. In fact, I know that Indiana Borough won a walkability score. They have a pretty good, 73, right? Isn't it, on a walkability score? So it has probably a more diverse population than most of the county. And those things are positives. Young people want to see that. Young people feel at home in those areas. And it's a great way to inspire economic development. So I think that's all I got. I'm just gonna let you know what the tools are that we have that we can help people with. I didn't bring this up, but for larger developments, we do sustainability assessments for those. So if you want a kind of back of the hand, quick assessment of whether this development coming into my town is a good thing or a bad thing, or an in-between thing that maybe could be nudged in the right direction, we'll do an assessment on that. So thank you. If you guys have any questions, maybe I don't have time for questions.
Yeah, we're gonna go for the next.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's all right.